To begin the story of Takeshi Morishima's supremely dominant Ring of Honor Championship reign, we have to take a look at Glory by Honor 5 Night 2. The legendary Bruno Sammartino has come to Ring of Honor. He speaks highly of the promotion and the talent who power the machine. That talent, by the way, surround the ring to hear Bruno's words. There are also wrestlers from Pro Wrestling Noah. Sammartino finishes up, and the great fans of New York give him the respect he's earned. Here's where things get interesting. As the wrestlers from both promotions file to the back, Samoa Joe's attempt at being polite is taken the wrong way by Takeshi Morishima. What began as common courtesy degenerates into a fight. The other wrestlers struggle to hold the powerhouses at bay. Morishima is eventually escorted to the back while Joe poses in domineering fashion in his ring. This incident shall not be forgotten. As far as Pro Wrestling Noah goes, Ring of Honor has benefited dearly by working with the Japanese promotion. We're talking about dream matches happening like Kenta vs. Loki and Bryan Danielson vs. Naomichi Marufuji, and of course the historic encounter between Kobashi and Joe. Now, as the 5th year festival begins, you can add Takeshi Morishima to the list of Noah talent performing in ROH. Morishima makes his in-ring debut against Peli Primo. And, well, that's that. Big Shima's not here to play games. He wants to get his paws on Samoa Joe. Nigel McGuinness tries to calm Takeshi Morishima down. Seeing as Nigel wrestles for both ROH and Noah, he acts as something of a representative for him while in Ring of Honor. Cooler heads prevail. For the moment. Later in the night, Samoa Joe goes after Nigel because of pre-existing animosity. Takeshi Morishima steps in, and Nigel's no longer interested in playing peacekeeper. The men come to blows. The ref calls for the bell. We have ourselves a match. This is different from most Samoa Joe matches, though. The Japanese wrestler appears to be larger than the ROH legend, and he overwhelms Joe in a way no one else has been able to. Joe weathers the offensive storm, and then he reminds everyone of who the hell he is. When it comes to these two, it's all about that base, no trouble. Morishima gets his nose bloodied. Joe sees this as an invitation to chomp down on it. Joe nails a huge muscle buster on the opponent. Shima kicks out afterward, and Joe's in utter disbelief. To the Samoan's credit, he takes a Uranagi, followed by a backdrop driver, and kicks out. A second backdrop driver will surely be too much. Joe must end this contest. Like a pit bull, he locks in a coquina clutch with such tenacity that not even the jaws of life could pry him off. Morishima passes out, and the referee calls for the bell. Joe has successfully defended his turf. Morishima can lick his wounds for the night, because despite this loss, the big man is getting an ROH world title match tomorrow. The current champion, Homicide, has taken the ball and is running with it. At Final Battle, he was the one to end Bryan Danielson's spectacular 462-day reign as champion. Since then, he successfully defended the belt against Chris Hero and Jimmy Rave. He even managed to defeat longtime rival Samoa Joe. Homicide's only been the top guy for a few months, but he's ready and willing to travel the champion's road. And if a behemoth like Morishima is next in line for a title shot, Homicide's prepared to do what he must to hold on to the gold. It's 24 hours later in Philadelphia. Takeshi Morishima has the opportunity to rule Ring of Honor with an iron fist. Accompanied by Julius Smokes, Homicide approaches his destiny. Morishima's in a particularly foul mood. He jumps Homicide and displays his killer instinct. Homicide's caught off guard. With a tornado DDT and tope con hilo, he begins to fire offense right back. Homicide's as vicious as anyone, and he's not opposed to Julius Smokes helping, even if he isn't useful at the moment. Homicide realizes his attacks aren't doing much. An ace crusher will stun a man of any size though. 2 impactful lariats follow, but it isn't enough. Morishima hits a scoop slam and has bad intentions from up top. Julius Smokes saves Homicide. The distraction affords him a superplex. You'll notice Morishima's bleeding again. It doesn't appear to matter. He isn't stopping for anything. An STF may slow him down though. After that, Homicide hits a Hurricane Rana. Morishima interrupts a third lariat and plants Homicide. There will be no comeback now. At best, Homicide lets a final flurry loose, but it doesn't do much. A lariat and backdrop driver do not finish Homicide off, but he's out on his feet. Another backdrop driver ends his suffering. There is a new Ring of Honor World Champion. Many fans are surprised at what they're witnessing. A few students approach the ring. Morishima has no time for them, or BJ Whitmer for that matter. A supreme overlord has arisen, and he answers to no one. If BJ Whitmer wants to do something about it, he can try his luck in Dayton, Ohio. When the men meet on the 23rd, the new champion goes straight for the kill. The referee warns Morishima not to overdo it. That's fine, his body is a weapon. BJ Whitmer deals with a good amount of battering. A tope suicida leads to some offense by Whitmer, but the champ's not having it. This is pretty much Morishima's match, but Whitmer is able to cause him a bit of trouble in the final stretch. The challenger survives a backdrop driver and big lariat that follows, but a second backdrop driver can't be kicked out of. The big man was successful in his first title defense. What's next for him is another collision with a certain Samoan. Morishima joins Nigel McGuinness in tag team action against the former champion and the one man he wasn't able to beat. This is a special match for Joe. He's leaving Ring of Honor imminently. You could say Morishima's going to fill Joe's spot as the top heavyweight in Ring of Honor. Homicide mixes it up with the successor to the throne. Little progress is made. He tags in Big Joe to loud cheers. This is what people want to see. And they get a very close look because Joe and the champ fight all the way out into the crowd. The men take the fight back into the squared circle where Joe hits a muscle buster on Morishima. This keeps him down. But it's actually Nigel who's the real threat here. A rebound lariat defeats the ROH icon. A massive win for the British wrestler. Big things are in store for him. In fact, Nigel is ready for the top spot as he respectfully challenges Morishima for the ROH World Championship. Nigel McGuinness will get his shot, but first he meets the champion in a tag team match. Fellow Englishman Doug Williams is Nigel's partner, while Chris Hero is on Morishima's side. This is Nigel's chance to impress upon Morishima that he's to be taken seriously as a contender. Nigel does suffer a backdrop driver, but he survives Chris Hero's pin attempt. Williams makes sure Nigel doesn't suffer a second one. Nigel hits Chris Hero with a lariat to win the match. The message to Morishima is loud and clear. Although he appears unbothered, Morishima has quite a fight ahead of him. Nigel McGuinness walks into New Jersey with much fanfare. The people unite in chanting his name. The champion doesn't receive the same approval. He doesn't need it. He's all business. Nigel remains respectful as he extends his hand. Morishima isn't receptive. He begins the match aggressively. Nigel answers in kind, but lacking in equal impact. The confidence he had is fading as Morishima shrugs off his attacks. Finally, a lariat does a bit of damage. Desperate to stay in command, Nigel dives outside from the top turnbuckle, something unusual for him. Finally, Shima clotheslines the ring post. Now Nigel has a real chance here. The former pure champion enjoys himself some limb work. Morishima powers through and carries on doing what he does best. Since working the arm over wasn't effective, Nigel answers fire with high impact moves. Morishima takes a Tower of London off the apron. Just when you think Nigel's finally on equal footing, Takeshi Morishima's resilience has to be admired. Nigel takes a backdrop driver. He survives, but as we've seen, no one can kick out of a second one. Nigel's desperate not to allow that to happen. Nigel hits his rebound lariat for a very close near fall. Morishima hits a big lariat of his own. Nigel's still in this. A second backdrop driver leads to Nigel bouncing back with an attempted second rebound lariat. Morishima hits a third backdrop driver to hold onto his belt. Nigel is the only man in ROH to survive a second backdrop driver. That's a really big deal. Morishima has no choice but to acknowledge Nigel's fighting spirit. Big Shima isn't one to show vulnerability, but when he exits behind the curtains, he collapses from exhaustion. Austin Aries is next in line for a title shot. He's way more of a threat than he appears. Samoa Joe had an incredible run as champion. He was a dominating force, much in the way Takeshi Morishima currently is. At Final Battle 2004, Aries had Joe's number. After countering the Muscle Buster into a crucifix bomb, Aries hit Joe with everything he had. A brain buster left Joe unable to get out of the way of Austin's 450 splash. And suddenly, Samoa Joe's 645-day reign was over. Austin Aries had shocked everyone with one of the greatest upsets in ROH history. Now Austin attempts to repeat that history by slaying a different monster. Austin Aries is all over Morishima as soon as the bell rings. He's adopting the strategy he used on Joe. Big Shima is barely fazed by Aries in the early goings. Morishima's butt discombobulates the challenger. A big boot sends Aries to the outside. If Aries allows Shima too much control, this will be a very short contest. It looks like the champ wants a backdrop driver. Aries rings his ears and tricks him into stumbling outside. Aries launches himself at top speed. What's interesting is that Morishima mimics Joe's Ole kick, except with his butt. He misses the move a second time. Aries makes him pay dearly for that mistake. He keeps on him because he wants the brainbuster. He's going to have to work for it because that could be the deciding factor here. Aries gets the crucifix bomb off. A flurry of offense follows. He's close. Morishima shuts Austin down though. Shima goes to finish his opponent. Aries avoids the driver. Another crucifix bomb is attempted. He goes for a pin instead. Shima tries to crush Aries and it misses. Aries kicks Shima directly in the face. After that, he finally hits the brainbuster. The 450 is next. The bottom rope saves Morishima's championship reign. That was Aries' one chance. Aries tries another 450, but Shima nails a super backdrop driver. Next comes the lariat. Aries isn't staying down yet. Morishima hits a second backdrop driver. That's all she wrote. Aries couldn't repeat history tonight, but fans chant his name after that amazing performance. A man named Shingo is up next to challenge our champ. If you're familiar with current-day Shingo Takagi's work, he's probably on your top 10 list of best wrestlers. The Shingo of 2007 is no slouch either. This is all or nothing for him. If he can't defeat Morishima, Shingo's run in Ring of Honor ends tonight. He's not a small man. He's able to impact Morishima in a way few have been able to do so early in a match. When it's the champ's turn to fire back, he doesn't disappoint. He uses the Ole hip attacks he used against Aries. That's a lot of man to throw at someone. The forearms start and these guys don't hold back. Shingo suplexes the 290-pounder to a big pop. He then nails a Death Valley driver on the floor. Shingo hits his own backdrop driver on Shima. It's kicked out of. Oh, it's on now, buddy. The champ is ready to blow a gasket. A superplex barely phases him as he gets right up. A last falconry finally slows him down a bit. Shingo tries to keep the pressure on. Both men enter fifth gear as they share in a blitzkrieg of attacks. Finally, Big Shima hits a backdrop driver to keep his belt. Morishima gives Shingo respect. The fans do too, as they say goodbye for now. Takeshi Morishima has the chance to double up on gold by challenging for the ROH tag team titles. BJ Whitmer is his hand-picked partner because he impressed Morishima with his toughness. Why not Nigel, you ask? Well, Nigel's not at the event. You take what you can get. The current champs, by the way, just so happen to be the Briscoes, the very best tag team in Ring of Honor. Of course, BJ Whitmer gets a good dose of Briscoe bombardment, keeping his partner fresh to come in and level the playing field when need be. A double-team superplex actually hurts the champion enough that Jay Briscoe is able to hold his own against him. This falls apart when Shima accidentally nails his own partner. From there, Whitmer suffers a J-Driller and Shooting Star Press. He's not kicking out of both of those. The Briscoes make sure their belts aren't going anywhere. Due to the finish of that tag team match, BJ Whitmer walks in to respect is earned, determined to succeed where he failed before, winning the ROH title from Morishima. These two just go balls out as soon as the bell rings. Whitmer takes a boot, he's not giving up yet. A huge lariat is next, still not staying down. Finally, it's the backdrop driver. Whitmer's goose is cooked. After the contest, Nigel McGuinness appears. He's passionate that he has what it takes to dethrone the champ. In fact, Nigel's looking to do it tonight. Out comes Bryan Danielson. He doesn't want to hear it. Danielson thinks he should be next in line to challenge Morishima. Nigel takes his eyes off of Danielson and the former champ goes after him. Morishima actually joins Danielson in the attack. Bryan grabs the championship and reminisces. Morishima takes his property and leaves. Bryan decides he'd better do the same as Nigel still isn't done with him. This sets up the main event of Bryan Danielson and Takeshi Morishima versus Nigel McGuinness and Kenta. Nigel really gets put through the ringer as Danielson and the champ cooperate surprisingly well together. The name of the game here is Stop Nigel McGuinness. It isn't until Kenta softens the opposition up that Nigel is able to get his licks in. He even nails Takeshi Morishima with the Tower of London. Nigel's rebound variation sets the big man up to take a risky dive into the crowd from him. When Danielson kicks away at Nigel's elbow, he's left worse for wear. Kent is left by his lonesome to hold down the fort until Nigel returns to action, bandaged up and all. That's his lariat arm, by the way. Morishima keeps Nigel from interrupting Bryan's cattle mutilation on Kenta. He has no choice but to tap out. After the match, Danielson tries to be cute by putting Morishima's belt over his shoulder. He doesn't get away with doing that. Nigel's still very respectful. He hands the champ what belongs to him. Morishima lets Nigel know where his place is. The Overlord stands tall. Since it was Jay Briscoe who got the pin in the tag title defense against Morishima and Whitmer, he gets a world title match. There will be no niceties. Takeshi Morishima goes for the jugular right away. Jay takes quite a pummeling. When Morishima tries and fails to crush him after a sunset flip attempt, Briscoe has a window to bring it to the big man. After catching the butt with a suplex, Jay almost upsets the champ with a big splash. Jay gets a superplex off. Shima kicks out at 1. Suddenly, the champ's anger nullifies pain, and he hits a backdrop driver to once again retain his world championship. The next man to challenge Takeshi Morishima is Roderick Strong. Morishima tries to blindside Strong, but Roddy's prepared. He fires off his killer chops to discolor Shima's chest. It doesn't take long for Morishima to begin wrecking the challenger. He tries to backdrop Roddy from the apron. A huge chop stops him. Actually, you've got to hear this. Roddy tries a sunset flip off the apron. Morishima's crush attempt leaves him in a world of pain. Morishima gets slammed on the floor. This puts Roddy in position to start chipping away at the massive title holder. It only takes a single lariat to rock Strong to his foundation. Morishima starts in on Roderick and looks to put him away. The challenger gets off a pump handle back suplex to stay alive. He then hits a superplex, but Shima kicks out at 1. A Herculean gutbuster is followed by a sick kick for the count of 2. The crowd goes crazy. They think Roddy is going to do it. Well, that'll deflate hopes and dreams. Roddy does survive the backdrop driver by being too close to the ropes, though. Morishima lays some punishment in and then hits his driver in the center of the ring to retain his championship. Another one bites the dust. The commentators ask, who is going to stop Morishima at this point? Considering the very heated rivalry between Danielson and McGuinness, watching them tag together against Takeshi Morishima and Naomichi Marufuji is interesting. This is ROH versus Noah, but more importantly, both Bryan and Nigel are looking to defeat the champ. This is a very special night for Nigel because that actually happens. He's very nearly pinned by a backdrop driver, but Danielson rescues him. Nigel begins emptying all of his rounds into the champ. Fuji super kicks Nigel into the ropes and he rebounds with a lariat that actually keeps Morishima down. This is monumental. Nigel McGuinness is only the second individual in ROH to beat Morishima. The big rematch is just down the street. First, we stop at the Driven event. Takeshi Morishima is set to defend his title against Jimmy Rave. Unsurprisingly, Jimmy's mauled before the ring of the bell. To credit the challenger after sending Morishima into the guardrail, he actually manages to get some stuff in. He even gets Morishima in his heel hook. After reaching the ropes, the big guy lets Rave have it and nails the backdrop driver. Later on the same show, Adam Pearce says he's looking for some chump to beat up for the night. Well, instead of a chump, Pearce gets a champ. Morishima doesn't mind pulling double duty. The fans chant "You effed up" at Pearce, but this is an official world title bout. He can actually win the belt here. Naturally, Pierce puts his best foot forward. Adam Pearce responds to Repo Man chants by donning a black mask. The champion is not amused. He hits the backdrop driver to end this. It appears Shane Hagedorn wants some too. He can also have Shima's finisher. The ref counts 3 for the hell of it. Morishima appears done beating people up for the night. A battered Pierce gets comforted by Hagedorn. Alrighty then. Coming off of pinning Morishima in tag action, Nigel McGuinness gets a second title opportunity in Tokyo. Morishima's willing to shake tonight. The men attempt their finishers to begin the match. Like in their previous singles match, Nigel tries some limb work to soften his opponent up. Nigel tries for a sunset flip on the floor. Big mistake. It's almost an invitation to get knocked around by the champ. Nigel calls back to what worked against Morishima before and whittles away at him before ending up looking at the lights. He doesn't allow himself to be bullied though. He fires right back up and keeps Morishima on his toes. Finally, a backdrop driver quells Nigel's efforts. However, Nigel still finds it in himself to continue the fight. A Tower of London out onto the apron inflicts big damage. Morishima answers by giving Nigel a side slam to the floor. A second backdrop driver is delivered. Nigel's not done yet. He batters Shima until hitting a rebound lariat. It's only a 2 count. Both men go at each other with forearms until the combination of a big lariat and a third backdrop driver wrap this bout up. Both men are spent afterward. Bryan Danielson shows up to let Morishima know he will be taking his belt back. Nigel sends Bryan packing for the disrespect. Nigel hands Morishima the belt. Unlike the last time this happened, Shima decides to play nice. The champ stands tall again. Even with my GOAT looming on the horizon, these next few matches are some of my favorites of Takeshi Morishima's reign. Claudio Castagnoli is next. Pound for pound, he's probably the strongest guy in Ring of Honor. Morishima gives Claudio the business at first, but Double C nearly receives an early backdrop driver and is forced to up the voltage. Morishima's sit-down backfires as it sometimes does, and suddenly the challenger's in control. He even gives Morishima the big swing. Claudio almost hits his Ricola bomb, which is Morishima's cue to cancel his opponent's endeavor and get back to commanding the action. However, in doing so, he gets cocky. Claudio digs down as people chant his name. He hits a huge suicida on the champ. He can't hit the Ricola bomb yet, so he tries a pin, but can't follow through. An Alpamari water slide makes up for it, but it's only a 2 count. A third Ricola bomb attempt nearly sees Morishima pin Castagnoli with his 290 pounds. After an impactful superplex, Claudio finally gets his Ricola bomb off, but it's only a near fall. The crowd goes crazy as Castagnoli shows a ton of heart, but Big Shima takes the wind out of the room with a single backdrop driver. The champ leaves with his belt, but Claudio has the fans chanting his name. Oh, he's not finished with the champ yet. After experiencing the strength of Claudio, Morishima meets his next challenger, Brent Albright. This giga-chat of a competitor wrestles like a beast when he gets going. The alpha males square up and Albright isn't going to yield to Shima's size advantage. Albright hits a body slam and is able to assert a measure of dominance. Shima strikes the ring post. Suddenly, Albright has a target, and for good reason, as he's a bit of a crowbar merchant. The champ keeps from being worked over by initiating an outside brawl. This puts him in a spot to go on the offensive. The fans seem to lose interest. They don't believe Albright has a chance. However, with a power slam, something happens. People begin to stir. He catches the butt into a suplex. Fans become interested. The challenger locks in a crowbar trying to capitalize on his earlier efforts. Shima quickly gets a rope break. After avoiding a backdrop driver, Albright gets back to work with his crowbar. A desperation backdrop driver saves Morishima's arm. Albright kicks out. He delivers a superplex and follows up with 2 half-Nelson suplexes. As Shima kicks out, fans get to their feet. They finally believe. Everyone chants that was 3 at Todd Sinclair. The big boys start dropping bombs because this is war. But war is hell, and that's where Albright is sent with backdrop driver number 2. Morishima may be the victor, but Brent had everyone chanting his name at the end. Going toe-to-toe with Big Shima makes people. Like Claudio, Albright isn't done yet. The next match ought to be sponsored by Arby's because the fans are about to be served the meats. Not only is Claudio back to challenge Takeshi Morishima, but so is Brent Albright, and it's going down at the same time in a three-way elimination match. The challengers work with one another in an effort to neutralize Morishima. Brent turns his attention toward Double C as soon as Morishima's outside the ring, but Claudio knows the champion should never be ignored. Not to be outdone, Albright uses a senton on both opponents. After a big swing, Brent foils a Ricola bomb attempt. Albright looks like a total stud when he manhandles everything in sight. Claudio assists in a half Nelson suplex, which rids the ring of Morishima. Castagnoli gets Brent in the big swing. Claudio goes for a crossbody, but Albright catches him perfectly in the crowbar. Claudio rolls through and catches Albright with a pin. Now he can focus on one man. A Ricola bomb is hit, but it's barely kicked out of. Morishima won't stay down for a suplex either. Claudio fires off Europeans, but a side slam is the beginning of the end. The champ floods Claudio with offense until a backdrop driver settles the score. The champion was the best man tonight, but the question is he the best in the world? We arrive at Manhattan Mayhem 2. As Final Countdown plays, fans get hyped. Is Danielson the one who's going to take the belt off of Morishima? Well, speaking of the champ, you can hear the boos when he comes out. Fans are ready for a title change. Bryan has a smirk on his face as he kicks at Shima's legs. This is a game of cat and mouse. Danielson receives some clubbing blows. He responds by turning up the temperature. Morishima gets mad and traps Bryan in the corner. As you can see, it looks like Morishima caught Bryan's eye. Morishima's not going to let up on it. This contest turns south for Bryan really quickly. An Olay kick is accompanied by a hip attack. Bryan's in a lot of trouble. A desperate crowd dive and chair shot makes Bryan's audacious mindset apparent. Whatever he thought of Morishima prior, Bryan's finding out he's the real deal. He tenaciously keeps attacking the champ's legs. Not only is he looking for a submission, but Danielson's setting him up for the small package, a move Morishima ends up kicking out of anyway. This is where the challenger begins unloading. After a failed cattle mutilation, a superplex doesn't go Danielson's way. Big Shima begins getting ready to put Bryan to bed. With a backdrop driver, the champ gets through the best wrestler in the world. A crestfallen Bryan Danielson apologizes for letting everyone down. With only one good eye, he takes a walk of shame to the back. Eric Stevens is next in line for an opportunity at Ring of Honor's top prize. To be honest, there's a lackluster reception to this among fans. They were less than enthusiastic to see him punch his ticket for a shot. Takeshi Morishima does exactly what people expect. After avoiding the missile dropkick and nailing a power slam, Stevens garners a bit of goodwill. A TKO raises some eyebrows. But it's a German suplex and lariat combo that wakes everyone up. Stevens nails a doctor bomb and Morishima only survives because of a rope break. There's another near fall when the backdrop driver is countered into a pin. Shima gets cooking with lariats and successfully executes the backdrop driver to win the match. However, as we've seen before, giving Shima a good fight will result in a good reaction. This crowd, who didn't really care about Eric Stevens before, gives him a great send-off for the night. A while back, Bryan Danielson met Nigel McGuinness in a #1 contenders match at the Driven pay-per-view. It wasn't for an immediate title shot, but for one down the road at the next pay-per-view. Dragon bested Nigel that night, and this night at the Man Up pay-per-view, he looks to do it to Morishima. Bryan's livid over what happened to his eye in that last encounter. Unlike in that match, Bryan rushes the champ. With a detached retina and fractured orbital bone, caution is thrown to the wind. Morishima said he wouldn't target his challenger's eye, but it doesn't look like he's necessarily avoiding it either. This insane tope suicida is filled with Bryan's rage. That rage carries him through in trying to do anything he can to hurt the much larger man. A superplex seems to do just that. Elbows follow. He locks in the cattle mutilation. Danielson switches to trying to inflict head trauma. Danielson's thrown off, but he keeps going. A big lariat shuts it all down. Morishima delivers a backdrop driver, but the ropes spare Bryan. Danielson's last chance is a small package, but it fails. He takes a second driver, but Morishima doesn't go for the pin. Shima goes back on his word. The unmerciful giant wants to further damage Bryan's eye. Paul Turner calls the match as it's the only way to spare the challenger. Danielson lays lifeless as the Kingpin walks off with his belt. Up next for Morishima is a somewhat unique challenger in that the champ hasn't faced anyone quite so despicable yet, although you might argue Adam Pearce comes close. Kevin Steen rushes Takeshi Morishima as soon as he enters the squared circle. Steen is able to steer the course toward his ultimate goal in the beginning moments of the contest. He proceeds to wrap Shima's left leg around the ring post. Kevin's determined to cripple his opponent. He even bites his leg. Steen questions what's special about Morishima and then mocks his pain. That pain is something Shima begins to shake off as his anger seemingly empowers him. To be honest, everything Morishima gives Kevin is well deserved, but that leg continues to be a problem. El Generico runs out to encourage his partner. Steen hits a Swanton Bomb and Frog Splash. He only gets a 2 count. Steen looks for a trifecta in the form of a moonsault, but nobody's home. The challenger carries on, but Shima isn't staying down. Kevin finally resorts to his package pile driver, but it's not happening. The champ counters, and he starts in on those lariats of his. We know what's next. With a backdrop driver, Kevin Steen's efforts suddenly stop. What's next for Morishima is a huge roadblock. We come back to Nigel McGuinness. This is his third opportunity at prying the gold from the iron fist of Takeshi Morishima. Perhaps things will be different this night. After all, they say third time's a charm. The rich history of the ROH title was brought up, and that's no joke. Now, Nigel McGuinness is once again faced with the chance to cement himself as one of the ROH elite by becoming the next great title holder. The men shake hands and the battle begins. Finishers are teased in the opening seconds. Nigel tries the rebound again to no avail. Since Nigel is so determined to fire that move off, Takeshi Morishima punishes him by attacking his left arm. The challenger claps back, but he gets dropped right on the spot. Nigel becomes the recipient of harsh haymakers. A sudden lariat finally gets the big man off his feet. Nigel delivers another. He goes for the rebound lariat, but it's too early. Morishima comes off the top and eats another lariat. Nigel's certainly leaving his mark, but Morishima is not slowing down much. Nigel takes a backdrop driver. As expected, he's not going down to just one. After getting a big superplex off, Nigel begins firing off a lariat flurry. Morishima hits a second backdrop driver. Nigel uses it as momentum to execute his rebound lariat. Morishima kicks out at 2, but the champ's in trouble now. Both men let loose as they tap into their reserves. Nigel hits a lariat and Shima kicks out at 1. Nigel takes a butt and bounces back with another rebound lariat. At long last, it finally happens. Takeshi Morishima is defeated. We have a brand new champion. This special moment is topped off by the locker room pouring out in celebration. Well, Danielson's not celebrating, of course. Takeshi Morishima does the right thing and hands over what now rightfully belongs to Nigel. Even though this is Nigel's moment, fans chant "Thank you, Shima," for the blood and sweat he spent in becoming a respectable champion. For now, the future is bright, and it belongs to Nigel McGuinness. Well, that's that then, isn't it? Hope you enjoyed the video. Parts of it were a challenge to get through because I was battling RSV. All's well that ends well. Have a great day, and keep enjoying pro wrestling.